To hell with the date on your birth certificate. Let's talk about what we have in common across generations. Life, sex, and tech at any age. Welcome to Age Blind with Nancy Shenker.
Hey, boys and girls. Welcome to Age Blind, where the date on your birth certificate means shit because we focus on what we have in common rather than what divides us across the generations. And as many of you know, my theme this summer is hot summer fun. And that doesn't mean we're just going to talk about fun stuff. We're also going to talk about business stuff as we always do. And I have two amazing guests today. And the theme of today's podcast is how can you become hot stuff? So my guests are a professional PR person who also happens to own her own bakery and kids' kits for cooking. And I'll let her tell you more about that. And Jake Carls, who has been described to me by my new social media guy as the second coming of Gary Vee. So what Gary Vee did for wine, this guy is doing for food. And thank you, Nikki, for bringing me Jake. And I think this is going to be a really fun, dare I say, hot episode. So let's start out with just very quickly, how did we connect? What do you do? Nikki, why don't we start with you?
So how we connected is kind of a funny story. It was like, almost 10 years ago. And you were moving to Minnesota where I happened to be. So we connected and you basically kind of helped me navigate my little business back then. And I helped you navigate Minnesota. And Nancy came to my wedding. It's been like a crazy ride, but she's one of my greatest friends to this day. So,
and Nikki was my publicist and got me some amazing ink in the Ladders and HuffPost, now Thrive Global. So, more than just the queen of cookie cups, she also is a badass PR person.
Thank
At the
you.
end of the
Appreciate
episode,
that.
You could talk a little bit about your new venture and what you're doing. And Jake, AKA the new Gary Vee. Who are you? What do you do?
So I'm Jake. I'm 31. I am a rainmaker of a company that I co-founded called Midday Squares. And what a rainmaker is basically I make noise every day. I try to bring people to become friends of our organization. So I travel the world, I yell, I scream, and my whole mission in life is to show the world that you win by being yourself every day. So I'm trying to build the next biggest chocolate snacking company in the world, by showing that I take my own path that I believe in and that it could work. I didn't have food experience. My partners didn't have food experience. We were just three crazy people willing to build something innovative, disruptive, and do it while being unapologetically ourselves. And so far it's working. It's been 6.5 years. We have a long way to go, but we've built a chocolate factory that now makes 135,000 of these squares every day, these bars. And we've sold over 55 million of these squares over the last 6.5 years. And we believe the party's just getting started and we're still having fun.
So you're Gary Vee and Willy Wonka.
It's Willy Wonka.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think something unique, Nancy and Nikki, is one thing that we do really well that I hope the world can do more of is we don't just talk about our chocolate bar. I actually rarely talk about the chocolate bar. We talk about the story of how we build the business. So we actually show consumers the good, the bad, the ugly of building this company. We show behind the scenes. And what that does is it makes people feel closer to us, to the brand. And that way they're not buying a commodity. They're actually buying into something emotional, something that means something to them or relates to them. And I think that this is where the world needs to move into in terms of corporate and branding is stay away from features and move more towards how do you make people feel something deeply inside when you create content or you communicate with them. And that's something I think that we're at least on the right path towards. And I hope that we can keep getting better at that and better over time.
You're kind of like Nike. You're kind of like Nike is what I think about sometimes because they don't talk about shoes. They talk about the athletes, and like how you feel when you wear the shoes, but they never talk about their shoes. So that's what you remind me of a little bit.
Well, it's funny because I worked at MasterCard in the era of the Priceless campaign. And that was the whole gestalt of Priceless is it's not about the big screen TV. It's about the feeling you get when you gather with your family and watch something on that screen. So how many followers do you currently have on Instagram and LinkedIn?
I think so. Personally, I'm bigger on LinkedIn and Instagram as an individual. So as my own personal brands, I think I have between those two, like almost like 85,000. But I think from a standpoint of Midday Squares, like my company, on between TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, email, we have close to like 500,000, and 500,000 followers. When I say that, they're not customers. We have millions of customers. I think that the followers or the community that we've built, these are fans of the company. So they're not just buying the product. They're going out there and they're shouting about it. They're telling their friends about it. They're going to the stores and re-merchandising our stock, not because we pay them, but because they're part of this journey. They're front row on this journey with us. And without them, I don't think we'd be a brand. I don't think we'd have any type of brand. These people are the ones that are fighting for Midday Squares every day. And the way we do it is we built it by just sharing, like you said, the story. We made people feel something, and that makes them want us to win. They're cheering us on. They're rooting for us. And I think that all comes down to emotionality, not just product market fit, which is critical.
Absolutely. And that's a concept that actually was birthed with Zappos back in the day. And poor Tony Hsieh did not, really, and that's something that I think all founders need to be aware of, is that they can't let their brand be so much their baby that when they sell their company that they're totally lost. I think that's the lesson to be taken away from that. But he was the first real online shoe brand that it wasn't the convenience of buying your shoes online. It was his culture of happiness.
Yeah.
And when you went to the Zappos website, you saw his face. And there were a whole bunch of brands like Warby Parker or Spanx that really are what I call personality brands, that it's not just about the product, because product is a commodity. People ultimately buy from people. And if the CEO is a douchebag, eventually it's going to impact the brand. So, Nikki, you started your bakery brand from scratch. And can you just build on a little bit on what Jake said in terms of...
So anyway, I started this brand years ago called the Cookie Cups, and it's, come a long way and changed along the way too with pandemic and everything that we've endured over the years. So we're no longer bakeries. Now we sell baking and cooking kits for kids, which is really an interesting market because it's so small right now. We've had some really amazing opportunities, like with Today's Show, Good Morning America. We're in Kohl's, and we're working on some bigger retail deals that are going to roll out this year and next year. But what we're doing is we're creating this space that's teaching kids how to cook from like ages 3 and up. And, I don't want to talk about the actual kids too much, but it's teaching them life skills. So it's more about like the teaching and like connection between family and their kids, and how grandparents can connect with their kids is like in the kitchen, and we're giving them the tools to do that. So
that's so important, especially with, the boom in AI. Trades are going to make a comeback. So after the cookie cups, you can do the toilet repair kit and the assemble your own barbecue kit, because handcrafts and things that only humans can do are really going to make a significant comeback. So, as we all know, in the world of marketing and PR, things don't happen overnight. I was just looking at my KPIs for my new website, nancyashenker.com. I basically have only been promoting it since April, and now I'm kind of my own client. I'm like 60 days in. I'm making my poor social media guy, Tanner, miserable, because I'm like, why did this only grow 15%? Why aren't I doing this? Why aren't I doing that? So what do you do when things don't happen overnight? Because I know we're all type A, super, success-oriented people. What are some of your tips, Jake, for dealing with failure or just waiting?
I think the most important thing for anyone that's trying to build something meaningful is to understand that it's going to take a very long time to see it through, and we need to be patient and continue to move forward and execute. Little steps every day will compound into something massive over time. And I'll never forget, early on in my journey, I was talking to an individual at a coffee shop, and I was just telling him how it's taking so long to grow. It was year 1 of our business. It was so long. I'm like, we got into 2 stores, 3, whatever it was. And I was like, when is the big moment going to happen? And he looked at me and he's like, have you ever heard the ant story? Like, ants, like the bug. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, ants build mountains. And he's like, have you ever watched an ant? And I was like, yeah. He's like, have you seen what they do? They basically go and then they take sand and they carry it and they put it in a place. And then they keep going, they don't stop. And they keep going and going and going. Next thing you know, that little sand that they put is now a pile of sand. And then it turns into a hill. And then eventually it turns into a mountain. And what he was trying to explain to me is that you need to also enjoy the magic of the ability to grow slowly and let that compound over time. And eventually you're not going to even realize how big things have actually gotten.
Mhm.
And it's a moral to everybody, or it's a thing for everybody in the world, is like, there's no such thing as a 5-day overnight success story or a 2-year overnight success story. It's usually 15, 20, 30-year overnight success stories that people don't even realize. And even the social media brands that are huge today, they started in early 2000s or prior. And yes, Amazon, 1990 something. And yes, it's 30 years later. Yes, they're huge, but it wasn't 5 years ago. It wasn't 6 years ago. So I think we have this concept of instant gratification,
Mhm.
which is a downfall. And we need to be able to go out there and just realize that little things will compound over time, and you need to be okay with the middle. So the boring in quotation, and just keep showing up every day. And I guarantee you, if you do that, you're going to see massive wins at the end of the day.
So everybody who's building something should be an ant, A-N-T, not A-U-N-T. And I did actually just do something for myself because I was kind of in a funk, and I created a timeline in Canva of the last 22 years since I first founded my business. And I looked at it. It was as much self-therapy as anything. And I'm like, whoa, I accomplished so much. I've learned so much. I'm the same person, but a better version in 22 years. And it's sometimes what I call rear view therapy. It's looking back in order to be able to like psych yourself up to move forward. I know, Nikki, you've been like super impatient trying to get your product into some
No,
of the
I
big
haven't been
brand
impatient.
stores.
I haven't been impatient, but I've been doing this for like 10 years. Well, in one way or another, it started as baking, similar to like what Jake kind of started as, I think. And we opened a bunch of bakeries. And then during the pandemic, we started selling these kits, and like it took off, and it didn't make sense to have the bakeries because we were like, we just don't even need these type of spaces. We were like packing the bakeries full of kits. Like they weren't even bakeries. They were just being like packing facilities basically. So, it had to change. And during that change, I wouldn't say a pause, but it's when you're changing direction, things tend to take a little bit of time because, you have to figure out what works in that new direction. So it's been a journey, but I think that we're finally in the place that we're heading in the right direction and getting somewhere. So, it's good.
And one of the things you did, Nikki, to quote an old boss of mine, and I hated this expression, he said, you have to be willing to shoot the dog. It's like, who would shoot a dog? That's awful. That reminded me of that old, like,
Don't tell
National
that to my
Lampoon
dog.
cover that said, buy this magazine or we'll shoot the dog. But the reality is we as founders become so in love with our own products
Yeah.
that if we give it up for adoption, like you're seeing a lot of food brands buying back their companies now from big brands. Like the guy who invented Pirates Booty just waited until his non-compete was up, and now he'll be at the Fancy Food Show launching his new booty.
What's his name?
His name is Rob Ehrlich, I think is his last name, but he's on my short list of people I want to interview at the Fancy Food Show because he put his baby up for adoption. Well, not literally. He sold it for a lot of money, and then he wasn't happy with the direction that it was going in. So he's now rebootifying himself. So I know we're pressed for time. I just want to make sure we get through all of the things that our listeners and viewers would want to hear. We talked a little bit about this whole notion of influencers. And I've always called myself a quinfluencer, which is a quality influencer, that I will never shill for a product unless I like it myself, unless I've tried it. And sometimes I do it without even being paid. So do you think that the traditional influencer bubble, the guys who are like totally pay for play, you send them product, they wax poetic about the product, is that going to last? And what is the role of conventional PR in the marketing mix? So Nikki, I'll let you take that on first.
So conventional PR, I know we had a conversation not too long ago about this. And while it is changing, it's still so important to have those like digital placements, the print placements, the TV placements. I mean, I live and do that every single day for myself and my clients. I don't think that my brand would be in Kohl's had we not had some of those really big placements. So like it all kind of, adds up, and it goes back to that. I don't know where you're going to be a year from now, 5 years from now, but if you have all these media placements behind you, it's going to give you that ammunition to move forward how you want to.
Even
So
getting investors, when you go to raise capital, being able to say that Fast Company or the Wall Street Journal wrote a feature article about the founder or about the brand, or you were featured as one of best products of the year in a conventional trade show, it can't hurt. And I do think that today's consumers are getting much more savvy, and they're maybe not willing to buy something just because the Golden Bachelorette or Darcy and Stacy are endorsing it, because they kind of know that those people are getting paid. It really is becoming much more like
real
conventional
validation.
advertising than earned media.
Right.
I think, yeah. I think there's two parts to this. So I think authenticity is going to be the future of any sort of influence. So whether that be some sort of traditional, or that would be some individual that has a big following, I think that the people who are authentic, people feel that energy and they want to be around, and they trust that individual or that publication. So authenticity, I think, will be the currency going forward. Now, I think from a traditional standpoint, public relations or publications are actually very good. For us, when we get featured in an earned media, whether it be a certain publication or a big one or a small one, we just reutilize that on social media after and tell the story of it. And then it goes further. So I still think there's value in traditional media because people recognize the names. They think it's really cool. There's a sense of credibility. And then the writers are actually, some of the writers are very good. They're very talented. They tell great stories, right? And they inform people. Now, I think that's going to be the secret sauce, is how do you reutilize the traditional print that came out and then amplify that through
Like,
social
what do you
media,
do with
where
it once it happens? It doesn't just stop there.
But you can't just post, like, let's say I had an article tomorrow that one of you wrote about us, and it was an amazing article about some sort of topic, maybe let's say therapy, that my partners and I use therapy in business, because we go as family to use partnership and therapy, and we talk through deep conversation. Great storyline, by the way, for anybody. But what we would do is, if it got printed in a publication, we would take that publication, we would not just screenshot it and say, go check it out. We would actually tell a story in our version in terms of like how this made us feel. It was amazing to be in this publication. Here's what we talked about. And then we would guide our community to not only go read it, but it would fire them up, whether it be retailers, whether it be investors, whether it be new team members. But we would tell that story as an amplification on social media. And then that's how we actually utilize it to be optimized to the greatest extent possible.
Authentic storytelling is it.
Is the future.
Yeah. And, I talk about that a lot, that I finally became comfortable at the age of 69 doing my own personal brand marketing, because it always felt kind of weird and cheesy for me to be the person out front. I was always Oz behind the curtain. And then I'm like, wait a second, what am I embarrassed about? Like, I was a C-level executive. I'm a mom. I'm a grandmother. I'm a founder. Like, why can't I talk about this stuff? Because it will give other people, the word help is one that was our keyword for May, will help inspire other people, young women not to fear aging, older women not to feel like they're all dried up, and all entrepreneurs, no matter how old they are, to never give up, even when shit gets really, really bad and dark. So thanks, Jake, and Nikki, that was just a really, really good inspo for people who may be running businesses and just feeling like
they're stuck.
They're stuck, or that they're failing.
It's but I think it's Nancy and Nikki. I think it's important to talk about this. I know we don't have much time, but the idea, building something, so building a business, whether it be any industry, whether it be writing, whether it be PR, whether it be chocolate, whether it be kits, it's going to be very hard. The odds are stacked against you in all causes. Like, you just look at the data. The data's out there. We don't need to go over it. You could look it up. It will show you the numbers of failures. And it's also a very lonely journey. As much as you get to do what you love, and it's very empowering to do what you believe in and your passion. The journey to get to where you believe it needs to get to is a very hard journey that is very lonely, you're misunderstood. There's judgment, there's noise, there's all these things. the one thing I could tell you is surround yourself with good people along that journey and it will help. Number two is believe in yourself delusionally, because at the end of the day, no one's gonna save you, unfortunately. And then three, just know it is possible. There are people that have got it done. And knowing that, and with all those other things I said, I think it gives you your best chance at least getting a chance at winning or seeing your dream come true. But let's not, I don't like when people glamorize entrepreneurship, because 10% is it's on fire.
Yeah.
There's amazingness, but 90% is just solving a lot of the problems and actually getting through the obstacles. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's also not for everybody as well, because you got to be able to withstand immense amount of pressure and pain over long periods of time and keep showing up with the energy that you started with.
And rejection and stress
Yeah.
and. And I love what you said, Jake, about the role of therapy in keeping going. And I actually do want to interview you on that topic for one of the publications I write for. So
let's do it.
All right. So before we wrap up, because we're now 1 minute away from unplugging, Jake, how can people reach you, and who is your icon? Like, if you could wave a magic wand and enjoy somebody else's success overnight, who is that person you look to? So first, how can people reach you?
I love it. So yeah, Jake Carls on LinkedIn or Instagram, Midday Squares on all of our platforms. And if you ever want to buy one of our products, go on our website. We have all the stores there and all the websites that sell it. My icon, I would say, it's a hard one, but I have a lot. But I would say that who I really find fascinating is Michael Phelps. So he's a athlete, cool. But what I'm fascinated about Michael Phelps specifically is his ability that when he was doing swimming, he was obsessed with everything to make it work. And he learned to become obsessed. And I think that if you're going to do anything great in life, you need to obsess with what you're doing, not because it's a chore, but because you love it, you want it, and you're doing it because it's a choice, not because you're forced or that others want you to do it. It's because you want to. And I think that he did that over his period of time, and he became one of the greatest simply by becoming obsessed and not doing anything else in other ways, blocking all the noise. So I think Michael Phelps is my icon.
And then when he stopped, he was very honest and open about some of the struggles that he faced, which I think is really
powerful. Yeah. And exactly that, he didn't just show you the good, he showed you the bad and the ugly. And I think that that's reality of life. We all go through the good, the bad, the ugly.
Nikki, what about you? How can people reach you, and who's your spirit animal person?
Okay, so a couple ways people can reach me, besides my phone number, obviously, is thecookiecups.com. Those are my baking kits. And pitchpeach.co is my new PR venture. It's amazing. And my icon, I think, would have to be, I look at Martha Stewart a lot. And I watched her documentary.
I knew you were going to say that.
I would never, years ago, I would never say that, because just watching her documentary, you learn so much more about her and the way that she started. And I see so many similarities between her and I, when she got her first order in Kmart. And
just don't do prison time, Nikki.
Well, except for that part. Let's remove that.
I think you can skip that.
Let's remove it. But everything else, how she built her brand, sticking to that, and like, not even that it was food, but just the way that she built her brand and kept like changing, pivoting along the way. I think that it says a lot about her as a person and how she made it work. And, I like to think that someday I will be sort of in that, successful realm that she's in now.
I love that. And both of your examples, are really people who also do not act like they're better than, they inspire others to do similar things. So thank you. This has been amazing. And you could follow Age Blind on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, wherever you happen to get your content. And remember, follow our hot summer adventures and always be age blind. Peace out.
Yes.